Hey everyone, welcome back to our sawmill. Today we got something new at the mill. I've never sawed these before, but these are Shagbark hickory logs. They're about 20 inches in diameter and then this other log is about 17 inches in diameter at that base, and then it's got a crotch here with a seam on this end. This log has a bunch of loose knots. So if you're new to the channel, please subscribe, and if you want to follow me along as we saw up these Shagbark hickories, come with me. So like I said, this log has a double top and a crotch down the center of it. I like to line these up either with the blade or 90 degrees against the blade. So when I'm slicing down the cant, I can get that crotch to be within only 2 boards instead of, if it's 180 degrees in another direction, you'd be slicing that down every single board, and each board would have a split down the center of it, which would decrease the value of this log. This log is being sawn into 1.25 inch boards per the customer's request. We're just trying to leave them a little bit thicker because there's so much defect in this log. If we saw it 1.25 inch, we're hoping that we can yield a little bit more end product result. We're going to get less boards to begin with, but in the end I'm hoping we can get some more boards of quality instead of quantity. Right here, this log just keeps rolling in my way, so I move it out of the way quick so all my boards that I trim off the mill can go on my loader arms. That's so I can edge them just in the future after I'm done with the log. I like to do, on the bigger logs, I like to do typically 2 logs and then edge the boards, but in this case I'm going to edge them right after I do this log, just because I'm trying to yield the most lumber as possible for this customer. So if we look at the side of this log and the end, there's a lot of big limb knots and bark inclusions and all sorts of defect. As far as logs go, this is probably, typically if it wasn't a hickory, this would be thrown in the wood pile. Around me, there's not that many hickories, so customers tend to always bring them in and they always want them sawn. And a lot of them actually like the knot look, but they're just not very stable boards, and I wouldn't consider selling them, but I would maybe sell them as live edge boards with defect. But other than that, they're not great for furniture. But if you're cutting it down, you can yield a lot more wood than just using one board for a project. So on the very end of this log, the seam is 90 degrees away from being sliced down the center of the cant. And on the edge of this log, you can see all the limbs and how far they go down into the log. They're not shallow limbs. This tree must have been very bushy at a very young age, and the limbs never got any smaller. They started basically from the center of the log, and they were almost 2 to 3 inches in diameter within 3 inches from the pith of the log, which is pretty incredible. So now basically I'm just going to do is slice down the cant of this log because it's the only way to yield nice boards with that seam. So with that seam lining up right there, we're going to have a lot of knots and a lot of defect in every single board. It's what I was planning as soon as I started cutting the log. It's not, the plan's not changed because this is already one of the lowest yielding logs you could possibly have, so trying to saw for grade is almost impossible. You can get some decent boards out of it if you line up your first couple cuts right. You can get a few clear slabs, but other than that, every single side had 2 or 3 limbs, so you're not going to get very much for stable quality boards. You just gotta line up wherever the end cracks are going to be and wherever the limb defects are, and you can basically just yield as much as possible, but don't worry about wasting anything because you already know there's going to be a ton of waste. So for this log, I'm just cutting 1x10s. That way the customer has a larger section to rip out after it dries around the knots, so you can get 10-inch wide in between the knots, and on the edge of the knots, if possible, you can get 2 to 3 inches wide, 4 inches wide, just to utilize as much as possible without throwing everything away. This log doesn't take very long to saw with a brand new blade. Hickory, I guess, is a lot harder than I expected it to be. There's a little bit more wave by the knots if you're not careful sawing. You gotta take your time. This is actually my first time ever sawing hickory. I've never actually had any at the mill before. I've dried it for other customers. I've planed it, and I've edged it and all sorts of stuff, but I've never actually had anyone bring it to saw it. So this is a first one on the mill, and it's a very pretty wood. It's just these logs themselves aren't very clear. So this last cut here, I'm just making the bottom board 1.25 inches, and then the top one is just whatever thickness I can get. I think it's 1 inch, but so that's a wrap on my first ever hickory log. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, and if there's something new that you want to see, please let me know, and I'll see you in the future.